On this episode of Is the US military actually in a proxy war, or are we just defending ourselves in the Middle East? We have even more attacks over Yemen on Houthi targets from the US military. F-18 Super Hornets with the carrier Air Wing 3 aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in the southern Red Sea are reported to have struck a number of Houthi anti-ship missile launchers earlier today near the port city of Hodeida in western Yemen. The launchers were being prepared to strike at commercial shipping vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Now, this is coming from reporter Liz Frieden, who has direct access to the Pentagon. She is a Pentagon producer, actually, for Fox News. She's even saying the U.S. targeted and destroyed several Houthi anti-ship missiles today that were being staged to target commercial shipping lanes. A U.S. official tells Fox News these strikes were out of self-defense. F-18s from the USS Eisenhower were used to target Houthi missiles. We also get some interesting data and a stat here. This is the 6th round of U.S. strikes since Thursday, January 11th. And there have been 35 Houthi attacks on commercial vessels since November 39th. Okay, so the U.S. military is calling this self-defense, but we are now in the game of who's willing to take it further. And the ball is back in the Houthis' court. A day ago from the time of this video, when you're watching this, the Houthis had attacked a U.S.-owned ship. And what's interesting is, on that same day, the U.S. went after the rail systems for the launchers that the Houthis use. Again, several hours later, yesterday, the Houthis go after a U.S. ship. Now we are in the portion where the U.S. goes after Houthi munitions. Now the ball is back in the Houthi court. I keep making these videos and I really sound like I'm repeating myself. This is because it's like, U.S. goes after 2 missiles. Houthis launch 2 missiles. Now the U.S. goes back after them. You can see how this is becoming very repetitive and almost like muscle memory at this point. Now, something else I should point out is that throughout the Middle East, the U.S. military is in complete action. And I've never done this move before, but that might be the new move for the channel. The U.S. military, and I'll do another video on this soon, lost an MQ-9 Reaper drone up in Iraq. The reason why this is all relevant is because at the end of the day, the head of all of these Iranian-backed militia groups, also known as terror groups, they're all backed by Iran. And Iran right now looks like they have very precise and specific orders to the Houthis just by simple deduction of how they are operating. The Houthis keep going after civilian vessels, but they also keep launching their munitions in groups of 2. Maybe one will get taken out and the other one will back it up, but it's quite obvious to see what their SOPs are, their standard operating procedures are. It's just, hey, maybe we'll hit something, maybe we won't, and make sure you duck and cover because the U.S. military will attack you eventually. The other thing the Houthis will always have going for them is the fact that they are just able to sit in Yemen and no one's going to do a damn thing about it. This is because no military wants to commit to a ground invasion, and the U.S. military, Biden himself, was very hesitant to reclassify or redesignate the Houthis and put them on the terror watch list. This is a really big move with massive implications, considering this will mean that the people of Yemen will now forever suffer until the Houthis are out of that classification, or there is a legal way or a change of laws throughout the world to provide humanitarian aid, even though they know an organization is going to steal all of the humanitarian aid. So the U.S. military, again, finds themselves in a you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't type situation within the Middle East. And it looks like the U.S. military, they're trying to keep to their word of trying to prevent attacks over in Israel. That is the main role right now for the United States, but is going on the offensive and saying you're defending yourself becoming a new role or becoming a legitimate role for the United States? I'm just throwing the question out there. I don't know if it's right or wrong. The U.S. military clearly has no choice but to go after the Houthis if the Houthis are going to keep going after U.S. ships or other civilian vessels. I'm sure the rest of the world trade and economics of the world are extremely happy the U.S. is willing to stick their neck out to get the Houthis, but eventually there's going to need to be more world support to go after the Houthis in order for them to be destroyed or at least eliminated or suppressed to not disrupt world trade. I've already made a video about this. There seems to be a lot of countries who are not necessarily on board as far as going after Houthi targets, but they are on board as far as anti-piracy means in the Red Sea. The countries I've already talked about before in previous videos, and go check those out. It happens to be Italy, Spain, and France, but mostly France. And what's interesting about all these countries, again, there's almost some hypocrisy here, where their ships will get attacked, but that's okay. As long as the U.S. conducts more and more strikes, we'll pretend to back them, but we won't sign off on anything, and we won't help them out with military logistics. We'll just say, good job, and we'll look the other way. But again, understand, everything is okay to go after anti-piracy means. In my opinion, I think the Houthis are acting like pirates, and they should be taken out like they are pirates if they want to act that way. Now, obviously, I think the last thing anybody would want, to include myself, is an all-out conflict in the Middle East. But what are you supposed to do right now? When the country of Iran, it's now publicly come out that they do have the means now for nuclear warheads or a nuclear capability within that direction to officially create a missile to launch within the regions of the Middle East. What are you supposed to do? Iran looks like they just don't care anymore. They are okay with releasing or launching all of their all of their militia groups to act in accordance in one another to go after U.S. targets or Israeli targets. Something else I really do need to point out, and I'm not trying to make this such a sporadic video, but it's all relevant, is that Hezbollah and Israel, it does look like they're going to be progressing actions on the border. Israeli Defense Forces have stated, if the UN or the world does not take care of Hezbollah, we're going to do it ourselves. So again, this looks like it's all in accordance to how Iran wants to operate within the Middle East. Utilize those militia groups to do certain scenarios or situations or divert attention away from Iran. There is a silver lining in all of this, and again, I think a lot of you have heard about it, and if you haven't, you can check out my other video on this, is that Iran actually really did mess up in one way. They went after a target in Pakistani territory, thus creating some turmoil for themselves or bringing more attention to themselves as far as everyone is watching them, and everyone knows Iran is up to something. They've been oddly silent about the exact situation of utilizing their militant groups throughout the Middle East. But one thing they haven't been silent on just a few days ago is that Iran was willing to actually put their the Revolutionary Guard and make them public again and say, we are the ones conducting attacks over Iraq, over in Pakistani territory, and now Iraq and Pakistan are looking at one another and looking at Iran like, hold on one second. We are supposed to be friends. We are allied countries somewhat. We have a lot of religious beliefs that we semi-agree on, yet you are attacking our sovereign nations. Aren't you guys the one complaining about the West, that the United States is attacking the sovereign nation of Yemen? This is why geopolitics in the Middle East is rather complex, and how Iran does look like they will do some things right, but they will also do some things wrong. Ultimately speaking, right now they are in the ultimate position to do whatever they want. Because again, I really do think Iran is in a position of we're getting closer and closer, and apparently they do have the capability for nuclear warheads. And if that's the case, no one can mess with them, to include the U.S. military. You're not going to go after a nuclear asset because who knows who they'll use it on. So in conclusion, this is the story. You have the U.S. military continuing attacks over Yemen, going after the Houthis. The question will be this: when will the legality of all of this come into play? Because look, Yemen is a sovereign nation. They do have the right to raise some concern and ask, hold on one second, you have to go through us before going after the Houthis. Even though we don't like the Houthis, it is still rather odd that we're just sitting here like, missile here, missile there, good to go. And yeah, I know that's an oversimplification of the issue, but look, it is an issue. Also back stateside for the United States, eventually, is Joe Biden going to declare a war? Because the government is also questioning the actions of the U.S. military. We are calling this self-defense, but now we are on like day 15 of a continuous attack almost like every single day. And eventually, Joe Biden will possibly have to declare some sort of mini conflict or some sort of mini war or a change in tactical use on how the U.S. military is going to conquer or to at least contain the Houthis. Whether or not it's an aerial campaign, whether or not it's a ground campaign, that's going to be up to the U.S. military. Most indicators point to ground campaign or air campaign, because nobody wants to go on the ground in Yemen. Absolutely nobody, because then you're going to have to deal with the biggest humanitarian crisis we've ever seen in our lifetime. So I hope all of this gets squashed, but it does look like it's getting more and more aggressive in the Middle East, unfortunately.